So apparently this is just like on His Majesty's Secret Service, but done in a fantasy setting. Man, Disney really dropped the ball on this one. Either way, can't wait to see how the next one turns out.
Oh! There you are, Morgan. Listen, I have something very important to tell you. I've skimmed through every single page of this, aside from one that's apparently torn out missing, and I've come across a very important discovery.
Digit. That's one thing I can say, it's certainly this.
No good can come of that book. Well, what if I told you that I have the ability, or know the knowledge, to travel backwards, forwards, sideways, and slantways through time? Time travel spell. Years ago, someone knocked on my door and left that there. And all this craziness happened. Now we have the ability to go back, convince that person not to leave the book there, so that way this timeline will be safe as ever. Wouldn't that cause some sort of a paradox of sorts?
Digit. My life has been miserable ever since that thing came to my life. It is one tiny little moment I can do without, and I want it gone from my life. Well, you're the boss of this show, not me. Let's see here. Coordinates. Oh, there we are. Plug it into the power glove. Okay. Up, down. A, B, B, A. And presto! Whew. And now, Bella, we play the waiting game. Oh, that's not the page I was on. Oh, hey! A Patreon request! Well, there's something I'll definitely pass the time. At least for me. You, on the other hand... You good, Pop?
Standing in the middle of nowhere, wondering how to begin. Lost between tomorrow and yesterday, between now and then. Back where you started, here we go round again. Back where you started, come on, do it again. Back where we started, here we go round again. Day after day I get up and I say, do it again, do it again. Day after day I get up and I say, come on, do it again, do it again, do it again,
Well, folks, once again, it's request time on vaulting. This is the part of the show where I take a look at a feature film or a TV show that was requested to me on my Patreon page. And what lucky individual got theirs today but Michael Krusch. With his donation, he was able to get a feature film of his choice to be analyzed by yours truly. And right now I would not only like to thank Michael for his donation, but also the choice of feature film he had planned out for me. It will provide quite the interesting material for today. If you just want to be like Michael and have a feature film or a TV show of your choice reviewed on this show, go over to patreon.com/vaulting, make a donation, tell me what you want, and I'll see if I can work it into the show somehow. Well, with that said, What did he request to me today? Well, I think the real question we should ask is, once Return of the Jedi ends the Star Wars trilogy, where do you go from here? Well, what do you do when Return of the Jedi seemingly ends the Star Wars trilogy at the time? Okay, let me start by saying that I love Willow. That is, I love it about as much as the other fantasy movies I've seen in my time. After Jedi was released, George Lucas very much found himself doing an odd job of producing projects. Some were successful, and others... well, at least they had a new life thanks to the home video market. George Lucas conceived the idea early on, and thankfully he didn't go with the original title. Due to Lucas having connections with Ron Howard, and seeing how well Warwick Davis performed as a fuzzy teddy bear, the planets aligned and we got one heck of a popcorn flick. One that is full of magic and great imagination. But also feels a little bit like repeated leftovers at certain points. I'll get to that in just a moment, but the main thing I want to point out is that George Lucas waited to work on this project because he felt the technology was not up to snub. Well, in that regards, was it really worth the wait? Or should this come out earlier? One way to find out. Let's dive into some classic 1980s adventure and see for ourselves. So our story starts with... yeah, I see what you did there. It's because George Lucas wrote the story for Willow and the story for Star Wars, and fans for years had been seeing and comparing similar things between this movie and Star Wars, and many have debated whether or not Willow was a clone of Star Wars or a recycling of stuff from other films. Well, I was prepared for this occasion, because hell or high water, I'm going to review this movie on its own. I mean, okay, I might make some nods to certain similarities and connections here, but the key word here is try.
No. Try not. Do. Or do not. There is no try.
This is going to be a tough one. Okay, so we first learned that an evil sorceress named Queen Badmorda is trying to prevent a prophecy from taking place. It's said that a female child with a certain birthmark will lead to her downfall and has all pregnant women under her close eye to prevent it from happening. Prophecies. It's always a prophecy that jumpstarts these things. Helen of Troy, Theseus and the Minotaur, Clash of the Titans, Avengers Age of Ultron. It's the cliche that keeps on giving. One of the mothers finds her baby as the chosen one, and has the midwife sneak the girl out. Seeing she's no match for the Queen's mutated rat terriers, the midwife saves the kid by sending the child down a river on a makeshift raft. Thankfully, her first stop down the river bend is a village of dwarfs called Nelwynds, who happen to be...
You're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz.
Stop! 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 I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, there's no reason for that joke here. Because we as a generation have come so far to prove that little people are more than just a one-note gag. For 1988, the idea of a little person in a lead role was uncommon back then. And it still is. Yeah, I know little people celebrities like Peter Dinklage and Linda Hunt have made a big name for themselves. No pun intended. But there is yet to be something of a major property that stars one. Outside of TLC reality shows. Just saying. On the bright side, our lead is Warwick Davis, who plays the title role, Willow. He's a local farmer that lives...
In a van down by the river!
I kid. He lives in the village, but his farm is near the river for some reason. Well, then again, when you have good irrigation nearby, who's to complain? And what's his impression of the little tyke who washes upon their spot?
It's not an Elwyn. Looks like a Daikini baby.
Can't we keep it, Dada?
No. We'll push it downstream and forget we ever saw it. Come on.
Our hero, folks! Okay, I know Willow is supposed to kind of be like this. When a new opportunity comes along, he just sort of feels a little anxious, unsure of how to take it, but that's kind of wrong. Especially when you're introducing your character like this. Yeah, I know what they're trying to do here. They're going the route where the main lead wants to achieve great things, but is timid to advance forward. A better example of this is executed a tad better later on, when the High Aldwin, played by Bill Barty, sets up a test to get a new apprentice for his wizardry.
Magic is the bloodstream of the universe. All that you require is your intuition. Now, the power to control the world is in which finger?
Here is a hint. We only use this finger for the dark arts, so that one doesn't count.
No apprentice this year!
But, moments later on,
When I held up my fingers, what was your first impulse?
Well, it was stupid.
Just tell me.
Pick my own finger.
Aha. That was the correct answer. You lack faith in yourself. More than anyone in the village, you have the potential to be a great sorcerer.
okay, this I like. It defines the flaw of the character perfectly. Willow wants to learn the ways of real magic, seeing he does some tricks, but only for performance. Instead of being whiny and cocky, he's actually down to earth and fears the unknown capabilities of the trade. It makes Willow more relatable because he doesn't view himself as a being established with pure power or even greedy intentions for it. He wants to keep his feet on the ground while still be hopeful that his craft can take him far. Well, luck may have it because this baby is the exact ticket he needs. Willow is sent out to bring it back to its rightful owner. Oh, my mistake. Head to the borders of the human world, dubbed here as the Daikini, and just give her to a random bystander. As if this movie couldn't get any more darker. On the other hand, here's the best thing in this whole movie.
Give me some water, Peck.
This is Madmartigan, played by Val Kilmer, and he easily almost steals the whole show. It is mostly due to how the character is portrayed and how he's written. Viewers tend to have an interest in loner characters because, even though they try to shut themselves off from society, we kind of wonder if they have a heart. You see, Han Solo here, Madmartigan, is interesting in two different ways. For starters, he is a trickster. So most of the time, you don't know if what he's saying is true or a bluff. You can just see it on his face when he claims how skilled he is, and then enjoy the payoff later on.
I suppose you're a warrior.
I am the greatest swordsman that ever lived.
You are great.
On top of that, he is one that doesn't want to fight for the cause. He just looks out for himself. It makes the impact more worthwhile when he discovers what good he can do in making himself into a warrior. Even the chemistry between him and Willow is great too. Because they have different viewpoints of life, it makes for some really entertaining scenes when they banter back and forth.
I found some blackroot. He loves it.
Blackroot? I am the father of 2 children, and you never ever give a baby blackroot.
Well, my mother raised us on blackroot. It's good for you. Like a tear on your chest, doesn't it, Dick?
Her name is not Stitch. She's Alora Dannon, the future Empress of Tyr's Lee. And the last thing she's gonna want is a hairy chest.
Did you see what he did? He stole our blackroot. I'll get some more, don't worry about it.
However, they do know when one needs the other in battle and work off each other despite their differences. And speaking of odd couples,
I stole the baby! Yeah!
That's my baby!
okay, before I talk about these guys, I want to address something. I really like how Willow shows its mythology and doesn't tell it. The way it helps you believe this fantasy world exists is through visuals and briefly explaining terminology when needed. So it's not too confusing and it's easy to understand. So if dwarfs in this world are called Nelwyns, and humans in this world are called Daikinis, These things are...
Ow! Brownies! Let's get out of here!
Really? Brownies? That is the best you can come up with? I mean, not to nitpick here, but of all the things that you're defining and doing to make this whole world believable and unlike our own, you name these creatures after a dessert that's manufactured by Betty Crocker and Duncan Hines? What did you do? Wait a minute. Wait. What? It's a Wikipedia page. Stupid! I'm so stupid! Now, every time I think of a chocolate brownie, this will come to mind.
Here, I've got something for us to snack on.
You know how I hate people.
They're new. They're called Screaming No-Nos.
How come they're called Screaming No-Nos?
Oh, no!
Oh, okay.
Even though they are not on for long, I will give this much credit. The special effects work on the brownies almost work. Sure, there are times you can tell it's composited and other times where they blend in seamlessly. The reason for existing is not only to get some good exposition to a main character, but also to have us introduced to our comic relief, Rule and Fragine. And yes, I'm aware they're played by Kevin Pollak and Rick Overton. Needless to say, their bickering is kind of on par with R2-D2 and C-3PO. I mean, no, it's, more like, the two-headed monster from Sesame Street!
Oh, you fool! He does not need to know everything.
I didn't tell him everything.
You told him enough.
Give me. No, meat sandwich. No, meat sandwich. No, meat sandwich.
You are drunk, and when you are drunk, you forget that I am in charge.
Hola, mula, go to the bimbo!
This way.
No. This way.
This way.
That's what I said.
Their banter does get a tad annoying at times, but they do have some funny moments at best.
Besides, even if we find them, they'll catch us, stick us in cages, torture us, and finally devour us.
Are you suggesting we go home?
Nah, this is more fun.
The only thing that weirds me out is why they speak in French accents. Maybe it's just me, but it just feels somewhat off-putting, especially when Monty Python comes to mind after hearing this.
Take these two lizards out and drown them.
Lizards? Who are you calling lizards?
Your mother was a lizard.
Your mother was a hamster, and your father smelt of elderberries.
Our final companion on the journey is Finn Raziel. She is a good sorceress who was turned into an animal by the Queen, and Willow constantly tries to get her back to her natural form. The concept itself is actually interesting and leads to some very still impressive morphing effects. Most of the time she comes off as an additional comic relief, but also adds to the theme of faith. As explained before, Willow is trying to understand magic, and not parlor tricks. Raziel's presence in the story expands on how otherworldly powers can be used as a force of nature. Even then, Willow's learnings of handling magic are not easy. Unlike Harry Potter, where you can learn to levitate a feather, here there is patience and skill you need in order to master these abilities. Just as long as you have the heart for it and the will to not get torn to shreds when you turn your teacher into a tiger. So you're probably thinking to yourself, this seems good already, then surely the story must be flawless! Well, they say your story is only as good as your villains. And here's where the problems start to surface. Queen Badmorda's motivations in obtaining the baby are never really made clear. One could argue she's trying to make the child dark as her, or doing this because she is evil. Ooh.
Evil!
And if that was the case, what is unique about this child anyway? Yeah, the prophecy says the kid will bring the queen's downfall, but it's not like she has any special powers or anything. Most of the time we just see the baby's reactions when they are called for, and it feels sort of routine when you get near the end. Oh, who's a cute little MacGuffin? Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Ow! Ooh, 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 ooh. Teething. Bad MacGuffin. Bad MacGuffin. And as cool and menacing as Badmorda is, there's not much of a motivation to her will. She just acts like your typical bad guy, and that's it.
She only exists as an obstacle for the hero to overcome. Even the Queen in Disney's Snow White had a more interesting motivation in comparison. Okay, it was not strong, but it made you wonder why she would risk so much for her vanity. Even one of her henchmen named General Kale is shallower than she is. Yeah, he has this cool design that looks like a demented Skeletor crossplay, but most of the time he's just under orders to capture this kid. He does get an intimidating moment when pitted against her heroes, but again, he's only an obstacle. The only other character I can think of that sort of falls in the middle is Sorsha, Bad Morta's daughter, who also fights in the Queen's army. There are elements I like about her, and some that sort of bug me. On one hand, this is an interesting character. She is a good person, but fighting on the wrong side. It's not until later she starts to second think about her rank and switches sides. On paper, that is interesting. But on the surface, she only exists because...
And sassy!
I know.
Even the reason she switches sides makes half sense. Earlier when Will and Madmartigan get captured, they try to escape, but a dash of pixie love dust they happen to have causes pre-Batman to woo the Dark Knight.
You are my sun, my moon, my starlit sky. Without you, I dwell in darkness. I love you.
What are you doing here?
Your power has enchanted me. I stand helpless against it. Come to me now. Tonight, let me worship you in my arms.
Get away from me!
I love you.
On one hand, this is actually kind of funny, seeing a tough character we've been with for so long become a softie for a couple of minutes. It adds a little funny beat to it. But when you really do think about it, it kind of enforces a love subplot and a reason for Sorsha to have a change of heart.
Yeah, tough guy gets girl, but it was all accidental. Even after that, they sort of keep questioning if they did have feelings for each other or not. So yeah, she changes sides all because the saint was briefly under a spell. I will give it this much. There is a moment I do like where she tries to escape and Madmartigan tries to stop her. And only for a moment they look into each other's eyes and question if there really is something there.
In a way, this is kind of a clever nod to a classic Greek myth involving Achilles and this warrior. And upon battle, Achilles finding out that said warrior was a woman. Right after he killed her. For it was said in the myth that after Achilles plunged his sword straight into her chest, still not knowing that he was a she, he took her helmet off, and once his eyes met with hers, seeing that he was a she, Achilles thought to himself, "Oh, darling, I love you!" Oops.
Speaking of mistakes, the original cut of Willow did have some extra backstory to Sorsha that is interesting. Apparently we learn that she is really under a spell and has no idea who her real father is. Later on, she eventually sees him at the castle of Tirazline, and I guess that somehow breaks the spell. It really doesn't make much sense when you think about it.
Sorsha? Sorsha, I'm alive.
Don't ask me how, just get me out of the mailbox!
The references to Sorsha's father were completely cut, save for one little cameo near the end. But either way, it was for the best. I mean, if you're gonna have a father and daughter storyline in this giant grand epic fantasy, it needs to have a little more impact to it.
Interestingly, there is another deleted scene that could have been a good showstopper. When Willow goes to find Raziel on an island, he gets caught between a storm and a fun-sized version of Jaws. Dubbed the Fish Boy sequence, it would have involved a guardian of the lake who transforms into a monstrous fish and tries to kill Willow. Despite tons of effort on filming, and trying to get past technical issues, the entire sequence was eventually scrapped over concerns of how the puppet work looked in contrast to the movie's other special effects.
Still, not as bad as the animatronic work in Jaws the Revenge. And while I do understand why that had to get cut out, could you at least kept this in? He beat up Chaka with a rock.
For everything else they do keep in, Willow still delivers on entertainment. The musical score by James Horner is epic and fun, and the world they are creating is believable.
But two things that really help this movie stand on its own are the action scenes and the special effects. Before an era of CGI, it feels like a breath of fresh air to see actual fight scenes, stunt work, and swordplay on the big screen. There's a great amount of adrenaline rush that keeps you engaged, and it never outstays its welcome.
The only nitpick I do have is that if you're going to have these grand epic action sequences, why couldn't you use this piece of music to go with it?
And the icing on this whole thing is the special effects. With a great amount of creature work at play, you know people are going to be wearing prosthetics look like trolls, and effect technicians like Phil Tippett are going to bring dragons to life through stop-motion animation. Even in today's world, this is still very impressive stuff. Okay, some of it is noticeable, but when something is in front of the camera, you feel it's real. There is a careful attention to detail to give it a sense of believability to this fantasy world.
Dare I say it, the last 30 minutes of this movie are worth the watch alone. And just so I don't ruin it for newcomers, here's a quickie highlight of what to expect. You get Home Alone in the castle, freaky animal transformations, Val Kilmer training to become Batman, a Trojan rabbit hole, and best of all, a crazy cat lady wet t-shirt magic duel! With so much material stuffed in, you'd think that critics would praise it for the awesome and grand thing that it was. Well, about that. You see, Willow came out in 1998. 5 years after Return of the Jedi. And with Star Wars still celebrating the culture, what do you really think they had to say about Willow?
I think what the problem with this film is that it's really George Lucas's old bag of tricks from all the other pictures.
That's right.
I mean,
That's right.
When you watch this film, you're seeing there's no clear vision, there's no breaking of any new ground. I wasn't surprised by anything in the film, and I found it tedious.
You mentioned those tiny little people called brownies.
Yeah.
There were two of them, and they're always fighting, and they're always hitting each other over the head and saying, "I told you so, I told you so."
So that's R2-D2?
And it's, yeah, that's right, except that it's not done as well.
Right.
Somewhat.
I think they feel if they could have just packed this thing with all sorts of things that something might work. There was no clear vision.
Yeah, well, it was a disappointment.
You bet.
Huh. So that explains why the two-headed dragon in this movie was named after them.
On the bright side, Willow was a financial success and developed a major cult following on home video. And you can see why. It's lighthearted fun with simple characters, a basic plot that is easy to follow, and makes for a safe watch for the entire family and any viewer of any age at that matter. But even then, there's only one tiny flaw that keeps Willow from becoming a die-hard classic. Everything is too simple. Not in the cast of the story, but by how the characters are defined or the world itself. It doesn't make the movie bad, but it makes you wish there were stronger motivations at play, or maybe a few more risks and liberties that could have been taken with the story. On the other hand, George Lucas did write the story, so all it really needed was a screenwriter and a good director to mold this vision to something people could connect with. On that note, it does succeed in giving you something that is safe and entertaining. It could have been so much more in the long run, but what we get is still the perfect crowd pleaser nonetheless.
Come to think of it, I wonder how Digit is making out with his little time travel escapade.
Could it be that the simplest and smallest of things that he could do to interact with the past could cause some major changes and impact this current timeline? Eh, who cares? I could really use a refreshment the more I think about it. Interesting. Very, very interesting. Oh no. I went back too far. Apparently this is the point in time when Morgan didn't get that book yet. Well, I guess I'll have to...
Bloodworth Minions!
Minions! Of course! Why didn't I think of it before? This opportunity would be so perfect. I would have some in my control to do my own devices. So I'm not following one person. But slowly transport into the room. After all, I do love making an entrance. 555 679. Did somebody say minions?
No, why do you ask?
Because every great villain out there has an army of minions to act upon their will, and therefore do as the Romans do. Now tell me, where can I find some?
Do you mean vulture minions, or fig minions, or rats that act like combustible eaters, like...
Never mind. I'll just try another timeline then.
Who the hell was that?
Who knows and who cares?
Ugh, that's not a Milky Way, that's a... Okay. Coke, nothing like a Coke, nothing like a Coke. Ooh. Oh. What the? Favorite Cape Cod chips. Let nothing change. Marshmallows. Gadzooks. What if changing things in the past regards being big or small can alter the future? At this rate, anything goes. Anything's possible. Anything could happen. On the other hand, all I just really have in my refrigerator now is 1985 Coca-Cola. All Cape Cod chips are mini marshmallows, and every Milky Way out there is now a Snickers bar. These are just minor annoyances. I mean, what's next? Are they going to turn the banana splits into a horror movie icon? That is a double ooch.
Never been awake, never seen a day break. Leaning on my pillow in the morning. Lazy day in bed, music in my head. Crazy music playing in the morning light. Oh, ho, ho, it's magic. You middle of a sunny day, dreaming far away, dreaming on my pillow in the morning. Never been away, hey, never seen a day break, leaning on my pillow in the morning light. Ho, 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 it's magic, you know. Never believe it's not so. It's magic, you know. Never believe it's not so.
Still the same Bella. Still the same tennis ball. Same book. What the? Book 4? So much for that. Bella? How can this get any more interesting? English?
I saw you and the skull together in the same room.
Yes?
You were. And then
Do you mind? This is kind of private. Where were we? Oh, yes. Great! Bellin, you can't be serious! Cut.
I think if you read the script, better yet when you see the film, it's not an argument. The fact that it's called Willow represents the reluctant hero that we guide, save, take care of, babysit. You have to call it Willow because he's the reluctant hero, but quite frankly, you know, it is the Rule and Frangine show.
Yeah, no, Frangine and Rule, actually, technically.
What did I say? What did I say?
You said Rule is right. No, it's very close. Very good. That's all right.
Did I say
okay.
Rule?
No, it's cool.
I can't
just technically, it should be
he's right.
Frangine and Rule.
It's an alphabetical thing.
Yeah.
That's all.
Well, at this point, it is true. But we're going to cut most of their stuff out. Because Ron and I have the ultimate say, but at this point we're just letting them think that, you know, it's all their movie and it's about them.